Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. So, I had an idea for this video before I start working and restoring this book. And the idea was to record myself doing different things because this restoration was a complete overhaul of the original book. And the original idea I had was to record the entire process in a very ASMR way. But I ran into the problem that the things I needed to do weren't that noisy, and I was forced to work on this because of my schedule in times in which I couldn't assure a good level of ambient noise so that the audio quality would be nice. So, because of that, I ended up finishing the project without recording it. And I don't want that work to go to waste. So, right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to talk about the process I followed in restoring this book and what I did and why I did it, how I did it, and my purpose, other than to illustrate the process I usually follow, is to also relax you. Probably this video would be short if I had to guess. I don't know yet. So even if you don't fall asleep to it, at least you can relax. Why not? Well, listen to it. Alright, so before anything more to do, let me start with talking about the process of restoring this book. So, I bought this physical copy of the book sometime in mid-January, and I bought it for relatively cheap. It was like $2, just about. And the condition it was in, at first, it didn't seem that bad. The book was complete and the pages were good, the edges were clean, a bit discolored, but that's to be expected. And in general, it seemed that the state of this book was from medium to good. Depends on what you are searching for. And I wasn't expecting to restore it, but it just happened that as I was reading it, it started losing blocks of pages. So I was reading it, and the first 20 pages came off the spine. And at first, they didn't fall off completely, they just unglued themselves from the spine. And then the next 20 pages also unglue themselves from the spine, and then those first 40 pages came off completely. So, a bit in a panic, I didn't know what to do. I searched and found that to glue blocks of pages, you need a glue, a special glue to make books, bookbinder's glue, which it seems like it's just normal white glue, but it's more dense, and It's also acid free, and I think I'm not sure about that one, but I think it's not plastifying. Plastifying glue. It's really hard to take off. Like it's like Elmer's glue and things like that. So I bought this big tub of bookbinder's glue. It's a kilo, and I started to glue the unglued uh, blocks of pages back to the spine. Now, after that, the next 20 pages also came off, and then I had to glue those, and so on and so forth, until I was about halfway through the book when something awful happened. And that awful thing was that as I was reading it, I was just halfway uh, through the book. The entirety of the blocks of 20 pages that I hadn't pasted yet completely came off suddenly with a loud crack, and I found out that the glue had broken itself in the middle of the book, and all the 20 page block uh, of paper came off at the same time. So I have to do something completely different of what I was doing, and as you can see, well, this cover didn't make it. And why I had to replace the entire cover? Well, there were three main reasons. The first reason was that the glue they used was really old, and I don't know if it was cheap or if they just didn't put a very big coat of it, but it was really thin, really flaky, really brittle and hard, and it didn't stick to the spine at all. Like in the edges, it was completely raised. So that's one thing that probably didn't help. The other thing that also was a problem was that this book is relatively old, like the physical book, not so old, but it's like 20 years old, which in some things is not that much, in others is really a lot. And in bookbinding, generally, that shouldn't be a very big number. However, uh, it it looked as if this book has had at least 5 different owners. The body of the book is underlined and annotated in many colors and in many styles. Curiously, none of them made it past the page 57. I am the first one who owned this physical book that I know of that has gone past the 57th page mark. But anyway, so it had many owners, it had many adventures, let's say it like that. And the seller from whom I bought it surely didn't treat the book nicely. It was probably stored in either a very wet or hot place, and that didn't help the glue. And this was a street seller. It is common in my university to find book street sellers. So also that didn't help. But the main reason I think that this book wasn't stable, other than the glue, other than the years, was that when you compare the amount of pages that the book has, which I'll show you in a minute, to how thick this cover is you will see, just when I show you, that there were more pages than this cover could hold. I don't know how they made it in the factory, in the press. I don't know what kind of press plates they use to bind this book, but it is about an eighth of an inch smaller than the amount of pages that the book has when you stack them up. So there was a lot of tension in the spine, and I think that every 20 pages, the amount of paper in that one had to move to open the book was just enough to break off the glue, which was brittle enough, but the extra stress of having a lot of pressure here in the spine pushing outwards made it so that when I reached the middle of the book, which is the point more relaxed for any book you read, because at that point, unless you have very, very strong glue, at the middle of the book you have tension equally, on the same tension in both sides, and that is the point at which is most relaxed on the spine and on the rest of the book, of course. So I think that what happened was that when I reached the middle of the book, all the tension suddenly released itself in the form of breaking of the glue, of expanding, of the paper expanding, and that made it so that the spine and this cover couldn't hold the glue and the paper anymore. So how do I know this? Well, because when I tried to fit the pages back into this cover, I found that about 50 to 60 pages couldn't touch the spine. When I put the paper in, even if I opened completely the cover, the moment I closed it, the paper pushed back and didn't touch the spine. So not even open could I fit in this strip the entirety of the book. So I realized that this, unless I found a very effective press, would not do. And even if I did find a very good press, the problem would still be there, because I'll just put more tension into an already weakened spine. And as you can see, the spine is really weak in these parts because it lost a shell of paper, right? So this cover couldn't be salvaged, sadly. Luckily, I could salvage the index, which was pasted into the cover right here. It wasn't pasted into the spine, it was pasted to this side of the cover. But luckily I could salvage it with some box cutter. And just to show you how brittle the paper is, as you can see with just my nail, I can lift off. Well, now I can't, but like here, over here, right? So I can lift a bit of glue from there, and while sure it's pulling on the paper and leaving a trail, consider that, well, this is just the remnants, the excess that fell from the spine. There wasn't so much glue in the spine, and also, yeah, look at that, it broke. So yeah, it's really brittle. You can look at how many gaps there are here, how many crinkles and wrinkles there are. So yeah, the glue was not the best glue. Any kind of force of stress applied to it makes it break. Sorry. So anyway, this could not do. So I needed to replace the original cover. But I had a problem. I already pasted the first half of the book with this glue, if you remember. Luckily, this glue, as I said, is not plastifying glue. It doesn't leave a plastic like a plastic film, and it is water activated. Now I know how it sounds. Water and paper doesn't bind well. So to activate the glue again and remove it safely, I had to use this little syringe. This is an insulin syringe. It never had insulin. I'm not diabetic. This is just a simple syringe one can buy at the store. And well, with this syringe, I took some water, and luckily, these units that it says here that it has, I think it's microliters or something like that. So it's not a whole lot of water, and all I did was take this syringe, put it in water, take some water, and then slowly I wetted the edge of the paper that had this glue. The old glue wasn't water activated, although I tried. So even though that was another step, what I ended up doing was removing this glue from the paper, which I already pasted. First, I removed it completely, and then I took all the pages of the book, and with a bit of sandpaper, P100 sandpaper, the same sandpaper I used in my last video where I cleaned an old book which was dirty in the edges. I used the same sandpaper, not the same square of sandpaper, but the same type of sandpaper, and I scrubbed the glue off from the edge of the book. I spent a lot of time scrubbing away the glue, the old brittle brown glue off the edge of the book, slowly, but with a firm hand. I didn't want to damage the pages, so of course, without a whole lot of pressure, but just enough to remove a bit of the glue that which came off just as sand comes off from well, you know, it looked like sand. So I scrubbed away. It took like 2 hours to get completely rid of that glue. And I also scrubbed to the point, and this is important, I scrubbed to the point where the pages were not bound together anymore. Some of them couldn't be unbounded because the glue got in the space between the pages, and no amount of sanding could get that glue off that space. However, when the glue was just a thin layer atop of the pages, a bit of sanding in that specific area could take the pages apart. So I sanded until most of the pages were completely separated from each other. Why I did this? So every single page could absorb some of the new glue I was going to put in there. So after sanding away the old glue with my P100 sandpaper, I had a very swollen book. I don't know if you noticed in my last video that after sanding the edges of the book, and even in this case the part with the glue on it, it swells a bit. Why this happened, I'm not sure, but I think that it has something to do with the way sandpaper sands, because you are applying a force that is perpendicular to the direction of the fiber. So when you're doing this, even though your movement is along this axis, your force is applied perpendicularly. So what I'm thinking is that you have fibers like this side of the paper, and when you sand away, those fibers get out of line and they get something like this, let's say. So the effect is that in a big enough scale, this looks like the book, as if the book has swollen, although it didn't swell per se, it just gained a bit of volume because of this effect with the fibers of the paper. However, I'm not sure. In any case, my general procedure when books swell is that I put them under really heavy weight. And this is where these boxes came to play. This is a chocolate sold in Williams Sonoma, and it's a really good chocolate. And however, right now these two boxes, because of course there are two boxes, aren't full with chocolate. They are full with cutlery. And of course, this amount of cutlery is really heavy. In between forks and spoons and knives, well, each one of these boxes probably weighs about 5 pounds, I like to think, maybe a bit less. However, I have two of them, both of which are full of cutlery. This one has a bit less, so this one is lighter, the other one has more, so it's heavier, of course. In any case, these boxes, other than for storing cutlery, are also to put pressure atop of the books I sand. So after sanding the glue of the book, I put it under these boxes full of cutlery, which was a good enough weight to make the book not flat again. It never was flat, but it forced it to take its original shape back, its original width back. It took about 2 days for it to return to normal, uh, and that's generally how long it takes. So it isn't crazy. It isn't a crazy amount of time. And in as a general procedure, I like to put this top of glue atop of the boxes, atop of the book, so it's even heavier. Of course, you don't want to overdo it because that can damage the edges of the pages, but I found that that is enough weight. So after that came the step of gluing the edge of the book. Well, before that, of course, I needed a new cover. As I've established before, this one couldn't make it, sadly. So I designed in Publisher a book cover inspired in a design I saw for the English version of the book. But I am dumb, so my design ended up mirrored, and it really doesn't matter. I personally like it. The people that have seen it have liked it. So, in any case, I designed this book cover. I'll show you in a minute, and I copied just about the important stuff, which is the author, the book name, who the publisher, of course, the spine. I try to replicate this idea. The back cover and the blurb on it, and again the publisher. I didn't care to put an identifier, a barcode on it because, well, it is for my personal library, and even if I sell it, it would probably be to a seller that doesn't need barcodes. In any case, I didn't put a barcode on it, and I like it that way. I think barcodes are horrible and they really affect the design of everything they are in. In any case, I had to glue the paper back into the new cover, and of course I had to print that cover. I chose a linen paper, a very thick paper. Although it's not that dense, it is like 270 GSM. It is thick enough to really hold everything together well and provide protection. And I made many tests with other types of paper and so on, and this one worked the best. And because it's really thick, I needed to cut it with a very heavy cutter because my small cutter, box cutter, didn't cut the paper. It didn't have the mass to cut it, or I couldn't hold it right, maybe. So I was using the heavy cutter, but I am left-handed, and that heavy cutter is made for right-handed people. And when I was cutting the paper with my left hand, holding the straight edge with my other hand, the edge of the cutter jammed itself against the edge of the straight edge and I cut my finger. It isn't really that bad, but that's the reason I'm using this bandage. That is really not like very important, but I wanted to share it. In any case, after having the portrait and the paper for the portrait and the portrait paint and the portrait printed, I proceeded with the gluing of the paper to the cover. In that step, I used this big ass pencil. Of course, this one is made for paintings. This brush, really more than a pencil. Or sorry, not a pencil. This brush, it's made for paint, and this glue was really thick, so using it with this glue was a bit tedious, but it wasn't something really that bad. So I took some glue and applied it to the edge of the book that I wanted to paste. Of course, I also applied it to the edge of the book cover that was going to become the spine. And I applied a very generous serving in both cases because I didn't want the book to fall apart after I remade it, basically. And as I said, I applied a lot of glue, although you'll see it contracted a lot, so it doesn't seem like that much glue, but I did put a lot of it. In any case, I had to work quickly because this glue really dries up fast and it gets gummy. It's, as I said, it's very thick just from the get-go, but if it dries a bit, it becomes like a very thick gum instead of a very thick liquid. And working with it as a gum is really hard. So I had to work quickly and I pasted the edge of the book to the book cover. Now, an important step here was that I have the book cover made with the spine in mind, so I couldn't miss where to paste it. So what I did was I folded the book cover without the book in it, and that gave me the spine to work with. And when I pasted it with the spine flat and the book cover flat. I pasted the book, and then with the folds I already made, I grabbed it all. And of course, the excess glue dripped off the edge of the book cover of the spine. So I cleaned it with some cardstock. These are really useful, and if you do work with physical media in general, I recommend having a handful of these at hand. In any case, after cleaning the excess and as the glue started to contract, there were pits forming in the frontier between the book and the book spine. So again, with this rusty syringe, I took some glue and put it in those pits to fill them with glue so that they wouldn't become an eyesore nor a compromise for the structure of the entire book. After filling those pits, I let the glue dry. First, under pressure, I put these two boxes atop of the book, and I left for about 15 minutes. And when I came back, I saw something terrible. The book spine, instead of being straight, which is what I needed for the entirety of the book to have contact with it, was arching like this. So, of course, what I did was take the weight away and left it alone to sit. And I put one of these boxes on the edge, completely parallel to the book spine. So, in such a way that if the book spine started to arch back like this, the entirety of the box would be there to avoid it, right? So I left it like that for about 6 hours, which is how long it takes this glue to cure. One thing with glues or professional glues like this one is that they have two important times. The first important measure of time that you need to know is how long it takes for it to dry, which is to lose all the solvent it has. And the second time is how long does it take for it to cure. Curing is a more chemically complicated process, but which is necessary for the glue to have better strength, more stability, and more flexibility, depending on the type of glue you're using. And although not all glues cure, this one does. So I let it cure for about, as I said, 6 hours, which is the time it needs. And after that, I ended up with the book looking just as new. And all I had to do was cut the excess edges from the book cover I made and printed, cut the excess glue that had already formed a solid mass in the frontier between the book spine and the book, and polish, well, not polish, but sand a bit of paper to make the entirety of the book level with itself, of course, because some of the edges were a bit wobbly. And all the first two things I did with a cutter, I learned my lesson and I used a smaller and left-handed cutter. And the sanding I did again with my trusty P100 sandpaper. So now you may be asking, after all that, how does it look? Well, it looks like this. I went for a dichromatic look. Well, trichromatic if you count it white. I tried to recreate the publisher logo, which I found is the same type of letter but stretched in this axis. I made it so the author and the title were different enough. The spine, I made two colors, red and white, well, with the background black. And as a little bonus, this type of paper really didn't hold well the ink when folding it, so it looks tattered and old, which it is. It is a tattered old book, But of course, the advantage of this spine is that it is stable. And the back with the original text, well, not the original, but the text that came with the original cover. It is the same text. The publisher, and as I said, no barcode. Now, you may be asking, what does this cover represent? And the answer is really simple. If you open it, it's a 1, and the name of the book is The One-Dimensional Man. Now you may notice that the 1 is mirrored. It doesn't matter, the message is conveyed, but I wanted the 1 to fold around the spine. If I put the 1 over here, and if I wanted to fold over the edge of the book, it wouldn't look as nicely when open. So I preferred this version than the mirror version. Now, the important thing is, as you can see, the edge of the glue doesn't seem to be that thick, but I've tried it and it is stable enough. Some pages have this wobbly effect, which I guess is part of how the glue bound the page to the spine, but even those pages, even the worst ones in that department, the most wobbly ones, are stable, and I've tried it, and as you can see, I can open the book almost completely and it doesn't fall apart, and it just bends, which is not ideal but expected. And as I said, I tried it in many places to ensure that it worked. And as I said, just to show you how much the book didn't fit inside the original cover, as you can see, even with the new cover, the old one is really small compared to this one. This one is not under so much pressure, and as I said, it's stable enough. Maybe it's not stable enough to last 100 years, but it's stable enough to last as I read it and store it in my shelf, and if someone else likes to read it, which for me it's a good enough job. So this cover wasn't the only part I couldn't salvage of the book. You'll see that the first page is a title page, but before this one there was another title page with a smaller title, and that one, one of the previous owners this book had, wrote on it their name, which made me really mad, because, well, I wasn't that person and I didn't steal it, I just bought it. So in general, I don't like when people write things in the book. I use post-its and notes on my cell phone. But this book, as I said, has been written on and highlighted in some places. As you can see, someone wrote here, someone wrote over here, and they underlined with pencil. And this is the worst part, they underlined with pen. I cannot get rid of this. At least with pencil I can get rid of it, but not pen. And over here someone underlined with yellow pen, which is worse. In any case, I'm still reading it, I haven't finished it, and every time I try to make a note, I put a post-it note, and then I make a note on my cell phone with the page that the note is referring to. Of course, this method isn't perfect either, because the post-it notes leave a tiny bit of residue even when you take them off. So if I take this book to a professional book restorator, preserver, they will have trouble. Even if I take these post-it notes beforehand, they will have trouble taking the adhesive that gets stuck on the edge of the book, taking that off. So even if it's a good method, it's not perfect, but it's the one I prefer, considering that this one will be for my personal library. And as I said, I could also salvage the index, which is a personal triumph because I thought it would be completely unsalvageable. So, as I said, this is the result. It took about 5 days to do the entire process, and I worked quickly because I wanted to resume reading it. But it's now done. It's stable. I really like it. I'm really proud of how it ended up being, and it ended up looking and feeling. It feels better, this paper cover, than this plastified paper or plastified cardboard cover. And I just generally like it, so I'll probably do this in the future with less important books. I've been scavenging for some old novels, in which I'm thinking trying something similar. But anyway, so as I said, this is the result. That's the end of it. But before I finish and leave you to sleep or continue with your day, which I hope it's going well, I'll show you what I want to do next time. And this is a project that shouldn't take that long. This book is from the 1960s and it's really old. And as you can see, the sleeve from the book is broken. And why is it broken? Well, because of an old bookmaking problem. And that problem was that some types of paper, especially this type of paper, was made with acid, which wasn't neutralized after being made. So that acid, with the humidity of the air, starts breaking down the cellulose from the paper. As you can see, I've already broken this piece, and I didn't want to because, well, it's a piece I've lost already. In any case, the cellulose starts breaking apart into tiny fibers instead of really long ones, and so the stability of the paper starts going down, and it starts breaking, and it breaks in this pattern, small flakes like this one. Or, in the case of thicker paper, the flakes are more geometrical. It looks more like a shape you'll see in a book instead of an amorphous blob. But still, it's the same pattern I've seen in a lot of acid-attacked paper. So my project will be to follow the general procedure of book restoring when dealing with acid paper, and that is to neutralize it with a special solution of sodium bicarbonate. Because why sodium bicarbonate? Because that is a solution that will have a very controlled pH, because if I use something more basic, the same process will start to happen again, just in this time, because of the basic nature of that solution. However, sodium bicarbonate has a relatively neutral pH. It isn't completely neutral, it's about 8, and you cannot get it higher than 8 if you just add sodium bicarbonate. So the project for this book, rather than the book itself, which is in a pretty good state actually, is to restore this leaf. Now, I cannot, for the life of me, put this sleeve back together. That would require materials I cannot get access to. A specific type of paper, goddammit, a specific type of paper to hold the two parts together again. And that paper, as far as I know, you cannot buy it in a paper store. You need to found it in a very specific way, in a very specific fashion, and I don't have the time nor the interest really to find it. So my interest right now will be just to stabilize this sleeve, this paper, and the way I'm going to do that you'll see in the next video. Of course, I already told you that it will be with a sodium bicarbonate solution. However, I cannot get this paper just into a bath of water and wet it, right? Because it will fall apart also that way because of the water. I need to wet it in such a way that the cellulose fibers cannot expand very much, and I need to dry it in a very specific and controlled way so that it doesn't wobble. So that will be the project for the next time. The next time I upload something would probably be this one. But for the meantime, that's all for today. I hope my voice was relaxing enough, and I hope that me explaining the process instead of showing it was also good enough and accomplish something good for you. I hope you have a very good day, good night, good evening, or whatever time it is where you live when you're watching this. I am Mr. Bookley, and thank you for watching.